So today for Follow Boss Office Hours, we're going to be focused on, there's Meg. Hey, Meg. Dennis. We're going to be focused on hiring. And we're going to stick today to more of a focus on hiring staff and management. Certainly some of the same principles apply to recruiting and just otherwise growing. And so we're going to try to stay high level with that. We certainly want to answer your questions. But first and foremost, I want to welcome Emily Smith to Office Hours. How are you?
I am good. Excited to be here.
Good. Awesome. It's a topic I know we're both passionate about. I know we both have some experience in that. And it's quick, I guess, really high level housekeeping. My name is Lee. I run a company called Amplified Solutions. We focus on operational help for teams and brokerages, which obviously hiring is a pretty big part of, leveraging talent and getting the right people in the right seats. So Emily, why don't you give us some of your background and then we'll dive right in.
Sure. So I work down in Orlando, Florida. I'm a part of a teamerage. So we're a brokerage that operates as a team called Wemert Group Realty. We are 60 people big. We have about 35 or so agents in the field. And last year we served 930 families together. So small, we say small, but relatively small but mighty. And so working every day towards trying to make our systems run really smoothly. Like we're talking about today, hiring is a huge piece of that puzzle, finding the right people to kind of bring onto the bus, so to speak, and then making sure that they want to stay. We say forever, but the reality of that is pretty strong. So, but either way, wanting to create a great culture where they want to stay, want to invest their gifts and their time and their talent into what we're building, because it's really expensive to go out and have to find new people. And beyond that, it's just a lot more fun to do it in a really healthy, good way together. So really, really passionate about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that. And you guys have some pretty substantial longevity there at your company, especially not even
Yeah,
relative to the business in general.
so of 60 of us, 25 of us have been around longer than 5 years on the team, which in real estate, we always joke that's like dog years. So they've been around for like 100 years, but because the business changes so fast. So I stepped onto the team just for history about 6 years ago, and there were only 18 of us total. So over time, it's grown exponentially, but we've kept most of our people in their seats along the way. And that's both agents and staff, which is where I credit our ability to serve a lot of people at a high level.
Right, absolutely. And I think, where I always feel like I should start is, like when to hire. That's always the first question, right? Especially if you've never done it or if you've kind of half done it, which we'll get into in a little bit, or whatnot. But, to me, whenever I'm at events or talking about this sort of thing, and, people's first question is always like, well, when do I hire? How do I know when it's time to hire? And unfortunately, the answer that everyone who's done it successfully will give you was before you need to.
Right.
Because by the time you get to the point where you're completely overwhelmed by the business, it's even harder to hire at that point. I know that's like
Not when
really
someone's crying in the parking lot. That's not the
right,
time to hire. That's the joke.
right,
We're like, if someone's crying in the parking lot, it's time to hire. Like you've
right,
missed the boat. It's too late.
right. And I think that starts, and let's talk a bit about this, Emily. Like, I think that starts with an honest self-assessment. Like if you're, you know, focusing on what you're really good at or what the things I always tell people, you always need to hire for the things that you never get to. That's usually the cue. If you're like, oh, I really need to do this, set up my follow boss or organize my whatever, or get an email, marketing email going.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big piece of it. It's where are the holes, or where am I expending so much time that now I'm up to midnight because I just can't physically get this thing done? Or not just, if you're running a team, it's asking your people, like, are you up till midnight, or are you putting in extra time in the morning, or expending more energy on something that you're like, this is something I'm not actually gifted at, but it got stuck to my role because when you're very small, everybody's wearing multiple hats and you're trying to grab all the things. So it's just thinking through, like, what does capacity look like? What does each role really need to look like for this season? And, based on growth, what does it look like we could let this person let go of and start to specialize in as we kind of slowly make those marches forward? Lee, just for everybody tuned in, I think today we're going to try to stay on more of like our staff and ops side in the conversation, right? And then in a few weeks, we're going to come back and talk about agent and like try to how to
Yes.
find talent, how to all of that good stuff, right? So if you're tuned in hoping to
Yeah.
catch both of that, we're going to do that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we'll cover will be relevant to that in some sense. But yeah, we really wanted to lean in and focus on staff and management. And to be clear, to me, that just means not licensee. That still could be leveraging a VA. It could be an intern.
Yeah.
I'm finding a lot of colleges have like true intern programs now where basically now they're paid, you have to pay them, but um, they get college credit because of what they have to do. A lot of times you don't even have to do anything or fill out a quick form to get college credit. So I also want to be clear, this isn't a $140,000 operations manager off the bat either. And we'll talk a little bit, I think, if we can get to it, about growing talent as well. Like it's one thing when you can go out and afford to bring in the person with experience. It's another thing when you can just ID somebody who's got all the warning signs of being great and then getting them there. One thing I wanted to mention about the self-assessment thing real quick is that there's so many tools to do this too, whether it's a disc or I don't think Keller calls it an AVA anymore, but the old AVA
The
thing.
KPA.
KPA, that's right. I should know that. And even other things from out of industry, from, something like the zone of genius concept that you should like really operate in the area that you're best. So there's a ton of stuff to read, but there's also a ton of free, a Myers-Briggs assessment. One thing I'll mention is I'm going to drop a link in a little bit to a guide that I wrote it's very long. It's got lots of info. It's got sample job descriptions. It's got recommendations on interview questions. It's got a 30, 60, 90-day review. So we'll drop that in just a little bit. So we want to make sure you guys get the supplemental.
I'd like to just plug that for a second because I don't work for Lee or with Lee in a professional capacity other than the fact that we're industry partners that enjoy kind of batting ideas back and forth. And I read Lee's manual last night that he's going to share, or his book that he's going to share with you all today. And there's some really, really good nuggets tucked in that book. And it's very organized on where do you start? How do I do that? Like all of the things we're going to talk about today are very, very well organized in that book for you. So Lee, I thought that was a great resource that you were willing to put that out in this group.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And honestly, it's come from just the fact that so many people need this type of help, just identifying that talent. And I also want to be really real for a minute in that none of us nail it every time. If I told you that I had the secret sauce to hiring perfect every time, I would not be telling you the truth. I mean, it is, but there are a lot of warning signs, I guess, is the thing. And when you and I have had the conversation around the fact that looking at that history and the idea, you and I both have some creative and organizational stuff in our history. And so I think if you're looking for operations or somebody to really kind of run the show, things with discipline, having played sports before, doing dance or being in the choir, things like that go for growth. Do you guys have anything you look like in your process when you're looking at resumes?
I think I'm just looking for excellence. So it doesn't matter to me where people are coming from. I'm looking for that match of, can they do the job that I need them to do? Do they have the skills, or can we teach them the skills? Because those are two different things sometimes. Or did they have previous success in whatever it was that they were doing? Did they go the extra mile? Did they, care about customer, or client, experience? Does that translate somehow from what they were doing? And even backing up a step from that, going back to Lee's original start, is you have to start with knowing why you're making that hire. Why does your company need this person? And it's not so much what are the nitty gritty of what are they going to be doing. It starts with, why do I need this person? And then you can start to drill down when you start to look, because you're going to find talent out there that's going to have a different gift mix or a different, you may have somebody that comes in that you're like, I need them to do X, Y, and Z, and they can certainly do those things, but they may have a whole different set of gifts that you could employ and put into play in your organization that's going to look different than you might have anticipated. So asking yourself from the start, why do we need this? And then maybe, you may have heard of like a missing person report. So figuring out like, okay, ideally, if I were to map out for myself what this hire was going to look like, I would be looking for someone with XYZ qualities, or I would be looking for someone that's fast paced, or I would be looking for someone that's not fast paced and can handle whatever it is. But asking yourself honestly, what does my perfect hire look like, so that you can really create and hone in on that missing persons report. Because oftentimes, and we probably see this too, but hiring posts are a mess. Like, we ask people and we throw spaghetti at the wall and go, well, I want someone that can do all of these things, and oh, by the way, all of this and this and this and this, because all we're trying to do is get stuff off of our to-do list, rather than thinking holistically about, like, what are the skills this person needs to have to translate into what would help us grow through this season.
I think that's such a great point. And I think the part of the problem is that you really do need both. And it really is hard to list all those things and still be at a high level and kind of understanding, like, oh, this is marketing, or this is operations, or this is, what, lead generation. Like, I need somebody to call. Just having clarity on that. One point I want to make, and I have the interesting privilege of saying this to a lot of people at random different times. You're looking for a not you. And I think the biggest mistake people make in hiring is that they find somebody referred to them maybe, or, oh, my daughter's looking for a job, or my cousin is and you like them, which unfortunately a lot of times means that they're similar to you, and you're literally looking for the yin to your yang. So I think it's really important to really remember deeply that, we love you, we've got a you, we need a not you to tackle the things that you don't like doing. And I know it sounds really obvious, but it's just not how people typically hire. They're just like, oh, this guy's great, he's just like me. And it's like, okay, well, what's he gonna do? The same stuff as you?
Yeah. And if you're a high I and you like everyone, or you can talk yourself into liking everyone to that point, you may need somebody else involved in your hiring process that can give you a little balanced look at who this person really is, or what their skills are. So you don't just hire not just people like you, but also people that you just like, because it's easy to feel influenced or like everyone. Jenny Wemert, who's the team leader of my team, always jokes that, like, we don't let her hire anyone by herself anymore. And the truth is we don't. And honestly, they wouldn't let me hire anyone by myself either. And I wouldn't want to, because you get to the point of where you realize there's a lot of value in having other people's opinions at work, especially the larger that you get and the more streamlined you get into, like, we're hiring not just an ops, like Lee is speaking to, like, you need an assistant or an ops person or something to be right next to you. But marketing, that's a skill set you have to have. That's a part in your pipeline that is going to look different than, like, an ops person or otherwise. So I think if you're listening to this call and you're like, I'm a one person trying to hire my next assistant, or my next, like, how do I go forward from here? You're looking to fill holes. Like, you're looking to plug the holes, like Leah is talking about, and say, I'm not going to hire me. I'm going to hire someone who can shore up on my weaknesses, or who can at least help me double time what I'm doing by filling in those time gaps or adding to my business. If there are two of you, now there are two of you to figure out where are the holes, what do we need? And the larger that you get, the more hyper specific you can be about your hiring needs, and the less spaghetti against the wall your posts become, because they can. So when I joined Jenny 6 years ago, even my own hiring post was spaghetti against the wall. Like, she was looking for someone who could do things that didn't make sense together. Like, I was like, okay, at random glance, this would make sense to very few people out in the hiring universe. But it spoke to me because it hit all of the core things that I was good at, randomly enough. And so it worked, and it was a little bit of a fluke. But now we wouldn't even have need for a post like that, because we've specified into our quadrant so much that we can say we're hiring marketing, we're hiring a transaction coordinator, we're hiring and you kind of get into, like, veined hiring segments.
Yeah, and something else I want to mention on that too, and this might be a little heavy for some people, but I think it's a great exercise. Looking at an org chart, or what I tend to tell people is like a 5-year org chart. So really drawing out, like, okay, what does this look like in 5 years? Am I the CEO? Am I out of production? Or am I in production and I hire an ops? Does the ops manage the marketing? Is there a like, just having some clarity. And here's the bad news. It's never where you go in 5 years,
No.
Ever. It's just an exercise for you to think about, like, oh, right, if I'm going to be here and so is going to be here, and we're going to have somebody managing the buyer's agent team or the listing agent team, or people can list and by, whatever that is, that's when you can start to back into like, oh, this person's an assistant now, but we hope they grow into the marketing manager or the operations person, or whatnot. So, and you know what? Sometimes it's just magical to take pen to paper. It's not always like that we have some fancy system to do this. Sometimes you just gotta
Well, and it's time too.
erase.
So it's carving out a piece of time a couple of times a year, even. I would even say quarterly, if not quarterly, at least twice a year, where you sit down and you go, okay, where are we right now in our business? And what are the gaps we're seeing? What are the holes we're seeing? Where are people running out of time? And where do we not have enough, manpower or energy to help with? And you can put any portion of your business into, is it leads? Is it marketing? Is it admin work? What is it that we're running out of energy, time on, or money, or whatever it is? And then work backwards on what do we need to shore up on that in the short run. Can we move people around in their seats? Does someone have more capacity versus somebody in your internal organization that has, that can pick up the slack on that? And when you start hitting the like, no, there's no way, which happens fast in real estate because we have so many pieces coming at us, that's sort of when like, I have waited just a little bit too long to hire. And that's to Lee's point off the very front of this is you almost have to use your time in planning to think, okay, what are those things right now? But also looking ahead, last year we served 930 families. I'll just speak to what we're doing. Next year, we're already anticipating growth. So if we're going to serve over 1,000 families next year, which is the goal, how do I shore up on my systems, people's capacities, their time, and get ahead of that? So by the time that we hit our busy season, which here in Florida, in Orlando, starts now, essentially. So through the fall, we were asking, like, how do I get a person in a seat ahead of that need? But I had to have asked that question way back 6 months ago in order to get somebody trained up at full capacity. And, we're here to talk about like hiring and the timing and questions to ask them and all of that. But it's also about the second part of the process, which is how do you get them in their seat fast enough and get them up to speed? And then I've seen a lot of teams in particular make the mistake of hiring people from outside of real estate and expecting them to get it like this. And there's a learning curve to this business that takes what I've seen about 6 to 12 months on the inside for somebody to really, really feel good and comfortable in a seat if they're coming from an outside business. I don't know if you've seen the same kind of timestamp, Lee, on that, but 6 to 12 months seems to be kind of a normal process for like really getting their feet under them.
For sure. I mean, it's a whole other language. I mean, you're literally learning another language in some sense. And, the other thing I tell people all the time is that then it varies by state. So it's not like we can just, download to them, like, what does escrow mean? Well, it's not called escrow everywhere.
Right.
So
right.
it is. It's very, there's one more thing I want to mention on kind of the identifying the role and maybe getting it to paper real quick. And that's the idea that to me, it's very important. And this is in that guide. To me, the job description is not the job post. I see so many people that want to post, we need you to, answer emails, take out the trash, do this other thing. That's not a job post. Like no one's going to see that job post and be like, this is amazing. I want to rock through this checklist every day. So the difference between coming up with a deeper job description that is a little bit more of the day-to-day, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but then making the post a little more of kind of an aggregate of that. So the post is like, we want somebody to, help us assist, serving more clients in 2021 or whatever that is. You don't have to put every single bullet point into the post. And especially now, because and here's the other good news. There's so many job posts you can go just look at. Just go to Indeed and search either for a similar role or just look at what other industries are doing. Mm-hmm. And you'll find the best ones are like a short paragraph or two, a couple of bullets, and like click here if you want to, be considered or join our team or whatever.
Yeah, well, and keeping in mind your hiring posts, you're wanting to inspire somebody to come work with your team or you, right? So if you said, hey, you got to take out the trash and do emails, I don't know who would be inspired by that. So connecting them to the bigger vision of we're looking for someone that can help us accomplish this. And if it's email organization or that type of thing, it's, we need someone to help us create organized systems, or like using language that's going to inspire people to think bigger. You don't want button pushers in your organization, no matter what seat they're sitting in. I'm a huge advocate for independent adult people who will take the reins, lead from their seat, no matter what seat they live in, ultimately, because that builds culture, that builds trust across your organization. And then you can trust them to do their job as like the person you've given the seat to. So inspiring them with the post to say, here's where we're going as a company, and we invite you to come along with us. We're looking for the right person to bring onto the bus long term to get us to where we ultimately want to be. And then ultimately, you still do have to know your day-to-day, what you're expecting from them, because if they're wise, at some point in the interview process, they're going to ask you, what do you see this job looking like? What do you see me doing on a day-to-day basis? And you still do have to have an answer put together for that. So Lee, this brings up a super good point to me for hiring is I see people not have their hiring process figured out, and then they try to hodgepodge it. So they post the post before they know how they're going to respond to applicants, or having a system in place for who's going to answer the applicant or who's going to do the phone interview, or how is that all going to connect together.
Yeah, you're literally reading my mind. I was about to go into some applicant tracking system stuff.
Yeah, that would be great. You want to go there?
Yeah, so let's go there. And one other thing I'll mention, because I don't want to forget it. Early on, when we were doing hiring for other people, I literally just used Google Docs to do it. So I don't want, and I'll come back to that Google Docs system. I'll make a note in a minute, because, I don't expect that a lot of you necessarily need to go out and buy an applicant tracking system, but I'll go through a couple. An applicant tracking system is essentially a follow-up boss for hiring. I mean, the one that we use is literally incredibly comparable to follow-up boss. That said, it's also fairly expensive and specialized, and it requires some setup. So if you're looking to be hiring people all the time, you might look into this one. I've got a couple of cheaper ones. The one we use is one called Breezy, and it's breezy.hr. And it literally, an applicant tracking system, by the way, is a piece of software typically where you can post the job in that software. It's typically going to go out to various job boards. Usually there's some sort of upcharge to, sponsor on Indeed and put on ZipRecruiter, and, but it does push out to all the job boards. But even more than that, when people apply through the system, they can go through a series of stages. You can send them automated questions when they first come in. So having something like that set up from the beginning is incredibly important. Another good one is called Workable. And I believe they're pricing now, I think they're at $75 per month per job. But that's a good system for people who aren't always hiring, because you can set up an account, and if you don't have a job, it doesn't cost you anything. The Breezy one that we use, like I've had to make email templates that like, here's this profile, grab a call with me. I mean, it's a lot like Follow Boss in that, well, once you spend the time to really customize it and come up with your templates and your flow, then it's great. But again, I've used Google Docs for this, where we throw resumes up into a folder, and the ones that are good, we make like an index that's just like linked to this resume and pros and cons of this person. And
I'll be honest, that's the way we do it. We don't hire enough or often enough to warrant needing a large company. And not to take us down another rabbit hole if you want to stay here, but most of our hires are going to come from either past client or sphere recommendation, which is the number one place I recommend you start when you're looking for a hire, is ask your network to be an advocate for you, because good people know good people.
Yeah, let's go there next, because I could talk for like 4 days about applicant tracking systems, and people would be like, "That's really annoying."
Well, and if you need it, you'll go find it, right? Or Lee's a great, like you can ping Lee, and he can even give you some suggestions on where to go find that stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I'm happy to do that, but I agree with you on the marketing to past clients. It's something I really just shout from the rooftops, because there are people that already know how you operate. There are people that, probably are similar. If they liked working with you, they're probably similar in some capacity, at least in personality or values or whatever. And on top of that, it's fantastic marketing. We're growing. Business is so good. We're growing. We need more people. We're looking for people, that you may know. I mean, honestly, I would probably hit that before I'd spend the money to get it out on Indeed or on some other some other system.
Yeah, we start there first for that reason. Our last few hires have come directly from Sphere or from past clients of either our agents and or staff. And what you'll find is that they will not make recommendations that they don't believe will be good fits for the company. So that's number one. So if you're asking your team, if you have a team, ask your team first, who do you know, and let them think through their network and their database first. And if you don't find the person in that round, then you can go out another ring and you can go, okay, now let's hit up the past clients. Or like Lee said, being able to say, here we grow again, which is a phrase we use a lot, is huge because they see the success. And as long as they still feel like you have that personal relationship with them, or if it's an agent relationship and they have that connected, they're not going to feel like they're just going to be a number in the system as you grow. So it's a twofold, right? And that's more of like a side note, I guess, but start with your team, then go out to your past client sphere. And then from there, you can hit every social media group. You can hit, you can make shareable posts. I gave a tidbit that several of you actually asked me about from the last office hours, which was have a VIP group in the back end of Facebook, like a secret group that you're adding people to at closing. It's something really easy to maintain. Keep it advertising free, but that is a fantastic place to drop in. Hey, we have a missing person in our organization. Who do you know that might be a good fit? You do, as a word of warning, have to be ready to have conversations with past clients that would really, really, really love to work for you. And you already know it's really, really not a good fit. So just be ready to have that conversation.
And thank you for mentioning that, because that is, I think, always the fear, right? It's like, oh, we're going to put this out there, or just in general, even if it's not a past client, even if it's just your friend or somebody you kind of barely know, that because you put it on Facebook is like, oh, me. So number one, if you do put it on Facebook and somebody's like, oh, I'm interested, DM me, then DM them the link to apply. You must follow the process.
Yes.
Always, because trust me, exceptions get crazy. The other thing that prompted me to remember, and this really freaks people out, when we work with people to hire, like if I don't get 200 resumes in, like generally, it depends on the area and the position, I want to get 200 resumes. I want to get 500 resumes, but we have a process that sends them automated questions when they apply. If they don't answer those, we literally don't know they exist. And then we go through and screen some of those for certain things. And then they get pushed into a thing where it's like, now we're just going to look at them more, not a phone call, not a, just literally. So I know it sounds scary to get 200 applications, but if you're doing it through a service, through one of these systems, that also kind of automates the process of, and to be honest with you, I don't, if you know them personally, you should probably give them some sort of official decline, but I don't stress declining people unless they get some sort of like interview call or at least follow-up questions by email or something a little deeper. You don't have to tell 200 people no. I know that's got to be a fear. We
actually send that out in mass. So when we close, when we officially make a hire, we just, as a polite gesture, send out this position has been filled. Thank you so much for your interest. We hope that, you'll stay in touch. If you have any real estate needs, please let us know. Like we just, you just plug it in, but it can be, it can be managed through Follow Us. You could send it through SendGrid to anybody that applies. So there's what Lee is talking about with using a service definitely helps create that automated piece. You can create that for yourself if you're not quite ready to hire a service by just simply creating like a Google form that they have to fill out to hire, or we have a form embedded into our actual website on like a career page. And so you can go to our career page. That's where we send anybody that's interested, whether it be agent or staff hire. They can go through like a career book of what it would be like to work for our team, what our culture is like. It's more agent focused, to be fair, so we'll stay away from talking about that too much. But the form actually asks them a lot of questions about like, what do you think it would be like to work on a team? Like, what interests you about working with us? Because we want to see, like, do they use proper grammar? Do they cross their, T's and dot their, and not that you can do that on a computer, but do they follow the details? If I'm looking for a super detailed position, I'm basically looking to do what Lee's automation is doing for him, using like a big company to do it. So if you're on the smaller end and you're thinking, I just need to hire that one person, still consider having a process where they have to answer some questions or upload some things to you. You're going to find out very quickly who's tech savvy and who's not by saying, upload your disc profile, go here to take your disc. And you're going to see, can they go to a website and figure out how to create a login for themselves and download the report and get it up? And if you're hiring somebody for like an admin seat who has to work in and out of a few techie based programs and they can't handle going to a website and filling out their disc, they're not going to be your best fit for that position. So creating like almost hurdles or stopgaps in your hiring process. If the system can't do it for you, automated style, like Lee was talking about, you can do it for yourself, even with just a very simple Google form.
Yeah, that's such a great tip. I mean, it's funny, I don't always think about that, but I definitely do that probably very intuitively, but just like, yeah, go to this website, take the disc, attach it back to this email and send it to me. There's not, that's pretty clear. It's not, but still to this day, I get people all the time. They're like, oh, you didn't get it automatically. I'm like, at what point did I say I was going to magically get it like, how in the world is Tony Robbins' disc going to know that I'm talking to you?
Well, and if you want to take this a step further, create an auto email thanking them for their, submission that goes out that asks them to do something else. So now the auto email is saying, thanks so much for doing this. Please also send me an email and answer this question.
Right.
So that again, you're looking, right, like
your top 3 books.
Yeah, you're looking for, can they follow directions? As the process goes on, you're looking for, do they stay consistent? Do they stay professional? Does it turn into texting you in all lowercase letters? And is that going to work for you in your client experience? I don't know. You have to answer those questions for yourself, but building that process from the start of hurdles to get entry level interview. So if you're going to get a phone call from us, what do they need to cross barrier wise to get that phone call? And then who's going to make those phone calls? Who's going to screen them? What questions are you asking on the phone? And Lee, I'd love to even know, like, what are your favorite go-to phone interview questions? Because I think those are somewhat different than even in-person interviews. So I'd love to pick your brain on that for a second.
Yeah, I'll give you the short version because I definitely have a bit of a system for that, or something I consistently do. The open, which quite frankly was born out of me like literally driving or something. And I'm like, I have your resume here in front of me, but why don't you tell it to me in your own words? Just right from the beginning. Like, this is about you, but I need you to tell me what your resume says. And it's unbelievable the variance of response you get. Some people, they have their pitch, I'm passionate about helping people, and I worked at this place and then I got a promotion to go here, and then that place led me to have more interest in this, and then I did this. The reason I'm looking for a new job is that I want to relocate to the Atlanta area. And I'm like, okay, wow. Like, they at least get an A or an A plus.
Right.
And then, there's other people that are like, well, I was at this job and then, I didn't really like it, or I did this, or everybody left, or just the people that kind of,
or they start throwing everyone under the bus from the last job, right? You're like, nope.
And I intentionally schedule, if that's an early call, I intentionally schedule them as 15 minutes. Because if I don't need to talk to them for more than 15 minutes, I have an easy out. Now, usually I set a block in my schedule so I've got more time if I want to talk to them. But then I also can say, like, hey, I want to respect your time. It's been 15 minutes. If you want to keep talking, you can obviously say, hey, if you have more time, I'm happy to keep going. But I think setting that time limit, and I think this goes for in-person as well. Setting a time limit, this is a 30-minute, name it a 30-minute interview or a 15-minute interview. But I think starting with that really sets the tone. We already asked this in our automated questions, but asking about goals, books they've read, trying to think of what else. There's definitely some of it in this doc. There's like a full list of them in the doc that I shared. But I think really quickly, and if anybody wants a reading rec, which is also in there, Blink by Malcolm Gladwell is a great resource for kind of the fact of trust your gut. Like, if you feel good talking to this person, if they really kind of resonate with you, and most of us talk to people for a living, right? Like, it should be easy enough to have a conversation with
I think brings us to the next point, and you actually cover this in your doc, and I love this. I circled it last night when I read it, was take really good notes. You have to have a little bit of a grading system. Like Lee's talking about talking to 200 people, and just like Follow Up Boss, where, you know, you've got all of this great data, you start to lose track of who you're talking to and how you felt or what they told you. So having their resumes printed, and it, like I print them and I have them in front of me and I'm marking on them, and I've got a little bit of a grading system of like, it's a pass fail for me if we go forward to in person. So it's either yes, we're going forward, or no, we're not. And then I actually will do the biggest thing for me in hiring is that people need to know what's next. So making sure whenever you are communicating with them, whether it be email or whether it be on the phone or in-person interview, it's wrapping up with what's next in this process for you. And if I know it's a no off the end of the phone interview, I'm not afraid to say, you know, unfortunately, this was a great talk. I really appreciate your time. Unfortunately, I already know that the fit isn't quite right at this time, or we have another candidate that unfortunately is, you know, a little, however you want to phrase it in your world. You have to be a little bit careful because it's hiring. But I'm not afraid to cut bait then and say no. And that's really scary for some people, especially when it's your first couple hires and you're trying to like have these calls and you don't want people to not like you, or you're afraid of what they're going to think about your business. And I do actually feel like people are okay if we're clear, if you're kind and if you're clear. You know?
I think 90% of the people that I've had to say that to have all said, thank you for letting me know. Because they're probably applying for 10 other jobs too. And they're like, okay, thank you.
Yes.
You know, and I've also had, unfortunately, probably shouldn't admit this, I've had backup people, you know, people that we didn't offer to initially that we had to come back to 3 months later and say, hey, you still looking?
Right,
So,
right. We've been there too. Yeah, no, that's kind of natural. I do think the other piece of this is on the what's next is already know what your next steps are. So if you're like, hey, my next step is to do in-person interviews, and you know that's not going to be for 3 weeks, you're going to have to tell them that. So you're going to have to say, hey, what's next for us is I've got a few more of these phone calls to make with a couple of other applicants, and then we'll be scheduling in-person interviews, but I don't anticipate those being for another 3 weeks. Will that work for you? I would love to take you forward in this conversation and schedule that time with you, but is 3 weeks, does that work? And you may have somebody that says, no, I need a job tomorrow. I can't wait that long. Or they may say, no, ideally, I'd love to talk to you now. And it'll tell you a little bit about their urgency and if they're willing to tell you the truth in that kind of a scenario as well. So you'll get a little better of a picture of what they're looking for, but you kind of need to know your own time frame going into those phone calls of what it forces you to ask yourself, what's next for these people before you start making phone calls.
yeah, that's really great advice. I'm glad you mentioned that. I also do that and didn't think to mention that. But yeah, 100%, you have to give some sort of, you know, hey, I'm going to review these with the owner, or we're going to do this and we'll get back to you, you know, either way. And that's another way to tee up the no, if it's possible, you know, hey, we're going to, you know, we'll get back to you by next Friday. So even if it's, you know, a no or whatever, you have some. And here's the other thing, and you know, again, this is a delicate subject, but you may offer to somebody that doesn't take it. So like you need to have like top 3 or so. And you need to offer the first person first. And if they don't take it, don't turn everybody down until you have someone that's accepted and maybe even filled out some paperwork.
Well, and keep in mind too, what we talked about earlier of starting your process 6 to 8 months ahead of when you actually need this person in your head. So doing these interviews early takes the stress out because you have time to find the right person. You're not scrambling to plug a hole. You have sat down, thought ahead, tried to think through like, okay, what am I going to need to sustain our growth in 6 months? And then think through your hiring timing. So like for example, we hired a client care coordinator, which is a TC, transaction coordinator in our world in the fall. And we hired her officially like in August. Like we did all the interviews and like went through the whole, it was painful. It took us 3 weeks to like find the right person, do all the calls, do all the, all of that. And then by the time we hired her, I knew she was going to have that 6 month, 5 to 6 month learning curve ahead of busy season. So I was paying someone to be a part of the team, learn our processes, build relationships with the other people in the business who wasn't up working at full capacity. And we knew she wouldn't be. So it wasn't my expectation that she would. Now we kept her busy because I didn't want her to feel like she wasn't working, but we gave her a lot of grace to grow through this season. And it's picking up in our world like crazy down here because it's January in Florida and people are tired of the snow. So they want to come south. So for her sake, she's ready. Like here we are off the cusp of what's about to get crazy. She's gotten to churn slowly on her files. She's gotten to like ask all the questions or poke some of the levers and go, why I don't, that doesn't make sense. Or, okay, I did that last time. I can do it faster this time. And she's got herself through enough. But I watch a lot of team leaders throw people in the middle of busy season because they just need to plug that hole. And I understand that money is a big part of this too. Like it's being brave and saying, I'm taking a risk. We are going to grow. I'm going to believe we're going to grow and we're going to get there and we're going to fill this person up along the way too. But that's a huge piece of what will make your hiring process not feel chaotic or having to just stick somebody that's the wrong hire in just to plug a hole or put some duct tape over something.
Yeah, and that's perfect timing because I was thinking let's cover a little bit of onboarding or just being ready for that.
Yep.
Then certainly want to take questions if people have questions. And you guys are welcome to raise your hand and we'll bring you on if you want to chat with us, or you certainly can drop your questions in the Q&A. But and there is an onboarding guide, I believe, in our guide. Should probably look real quick. I'm pretty sure there is. Yeah, there is. It's a basic one. It can be used with agents, and it's really super simple. I mean, it could be used with agents as well. But it's really simple. I mean, there's a lot of core things you need to do, like get them an email address, put them on the website, make sure that they meet some other people in the company. Just some real, make sure they have a key to the office. Just some basic stuff. But to me, that's everything, right? We spent all of this time and all of this money and all of these notes and files and resumes and all this stuff. And then if they come on and you have no plan to get them up and running, then that's really, I mean, that to me is the magical moment. It's like,
Right.
Okay, now we have the person. We've done all this to get the person. Now what? So how do you guys have a unique process for that? You guys are pretty big, to be fair. It's a process that scales, but can you tell us some about your onboarding process?
Yeah, I would love to. And then I'd love to even hear from you on what you suggest to folks for this too, because you've got some good stuff in your packet you sent out to everybody on this. The first is that in our world, I like them to know the history and the culture of what they're stepping into on day one. And it feels like a weird place to start because you're like, I should be teaching you your role today. You should know, like, because you need the hole plugged, right? So you're like, I need you to learn this. But to us, it's so much better for them to be like, oh, okay, you've been in business for 20 years. I'm stepping into the middle of a story. I'm not, day one of you coming into the office, like we're not just starting from here in our history. So walking them through, like, we started 20 years ago with one agent, over time, and you just tell them the collective history. We collected an agent here, and then we brought in a marketing person, and then we did this, and you bring them up to where they are here. And then you say, which brings us to you? So, the whole reason we hired you is because we really feel like you can, and you fill in the blank with what that means, but you're empowering them from day one to be a part of your story and a part of your company's culture. And you're challenging them from their seat to lead. Like it's your chance to say, here's who we are. We invite you from day one to be a huge part of our growth, no matter what seat you're sitting in. We invite you from day one to put your mark on our culture. That's where you're going. If you have a mission, vision, or your values or a culture statement, we won't get into ours in this call, but we call each other WeMates. So we spend a lot of our day one culture session talking about what does it look like to be a WeMate? Because it doesn't matter to me if you're staff or an agent or marketing or whatever, it doesn't matter. You are a WeMate, and I want you to live by the culture code of what it means to be a WeMate in the organization. So we actually cover it in our hiring process before they accept the role. Like this is who we're asking our team to be. And then day one, we spend a lot of time talking about it. The other thing we do is we invite about 10 other teammates into that conversation. So day one, and we've been doing this over Zoom because of the pandemic, but asking people to tell their story. So as we start the history lesson back here at 20 years, when you get to Tony, who came in year 5, you stop and you say, okay, Tony, you've been here like 5 years. Why do you stay? And you let Tony answer that question. And then you go forward and you find that, why do you stay? Why do you stay? And they can be short answers, but that person is learning about, 10 other people in your organization or 2 other people in your organization. And now they feel like they know a few people off the first day, and not just, hey, nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so, I'm, married, I've got 2 kids, I've got a dog. Like it's not that surface. It's, I heard your story. And then when you get up to that person, you say, okay, so just out of curiosity, what brought you to us, and they can share, oh, I was connected to a past client and I came through, and during the interview process I realized this was a place I could be really passionate about working. And now you've connected the dots to the heart of that person to the rest of your team too. So session one for us is that. I'm crazy passionate about it because I think it starts everything off on the right foot. And then from there, it's knowing what's the plan. So sitting down with them and saying, here's the plan for your onboarding. And again, all of this does is it forces you to have a plan before they get there. It's the same thing with your what's next. You have to know your what's next before you can tell them what's next. So the plan for us is to sit down and say, listen, we anticipate training next to another person lasting about this long. This is what they're going to cover with you, and giving them like a little bit of an outline of what the specifics are, and then teaching them, how does this fit within the rest of what the organization's doing? So day one for us is going through the org chart. Like, you met 10 faces this morning, but there are 60 in our organization. So here's what everybody does. And then here's how your part fits. Like, here's how your cog fits into this big old puzzle, so that they can see how, if I turn my piece, the rest of these go forward and we all go forward together. We really do talk about how every piece is important, and we can't go forward without every cog turning well. And that's a chance to talk about team communication. It's a chance to talk about how you pass the ball to one another. Because if you don't pass the ball well to this person, they can't do their part. If we don't pass the ball well to agents, they don't feel like they don't have a clear path either. So I view day one as expectation day. Day two is typically like technology onboarding and the nitty gritty of like, okay, now you have an email address, now you have a calendar, now you have and we've standardized some of that to video. So there's not a person sitting with them teaching them how to use their email and how to use their calendar and how to use the basics, or even like Follow Up Boss. They can watch all of those things by video. Then they have a person that they report to that's checking in with them on their progress on all of that stuff. Staff wise, it just depends completely on the position, how long that training period lasts, how long they're next to a mentor, so to speak. And then the biggest part of it is telling them up front, listen, we're going to do a big check-in, and you've covered this in your manual too, at 30 days. And we're going to see how this is going for both parties. Because the last thing you want is to be feeling like this is amazing, this person is unbelievable, and they're sitting in their corner going, I hate this. This is not what I imagined. This isn't what I signed up for. And don't get me wrong, we check in with them along the way using their mentor, but that 30-day check-in is really imperative. And then doing the 60-day check-in. Okay, did we address all of the things we addressed at 30 days? Did it get better? Or are you still loving this? And how are we doing? And then 90 days. And about 90 days in, you kind of know this person is legit. They're going to be here a long time if you both can kind of get to that understanding. But that felt like a really long, convoluted answer, Lee.
Oh, it was great. And honestly, it covered all my primary bullets as well. I mean, I think the other thing is that when people hire, a lot of times, because it is so scary, they don't really give a big welcome, or they don't send an offer letter, or they don't, it's kind of like, well, why don't you just come tomorrow and we'll see how it goes? And like, that's just not a good way to get somebody kicked off. Be excited. Something else I thought of that I had a client do. Now, to be fair, they were here in Atlanta. People I work with are not all here in Atlanta, but it was something where I could physically be present for this. They just had the team take them out to lunch.
Yeah.
They didn't go. They just had the rest of the team take them out to lunch, and see, you can tell a lot by how people treat, servers, and how they manage themselves while eating and around other people and all those things. So, but I think that wasn't done until this was a final candidate. We weren't taking everybody out to lunch.
Yeah,
we were just like,
smart.
all right, we think you're the one, but like, let's just see what happens in that sort of environment. And so, but similar to what you said, I think that sets the tone for, and the other thing I tell people all the time too, especially from out of industry, I'm like, this is such a hard business. Like, we gotta cultivate the small wins and be happy. And it's cool that we get to work together and do some fun stuff, because there's going to be times when it is not fun. Mm-hmm. And we're going to want to lean on each other, or somebody just needs a hug, or whatever.
No crying in the parking lot. No crying.
No crying in the parking lot. We want to try to give them a hug before they're crying in the parking lot. But
well, and on that note, like, telling them up front, like, yes, real estate is tricky and it's constantly changing and evolving, and trust is not built overnight, and we don't expect you to trust us day one. And the truth is that you are not going to trust a new hire day one either. But being able to have that conversation and say, listen, it's our goal that over time you would learn to trust that we've invited you onto this team and onto this bus for a reason. And we see that you are gifted and talented. And if you've got questions, I'm an open door. I will try to listen. If you need something, we're open doors. We will like creating that culture from the start of trust and opening that door for feedback. And honestly, sometimes a new hire goes, why are you guys doing this when it could go like this? So, because they see things from a fresh perspective. So it's being open to their feedback. And I would tuck some of those questions into your 30, 60, 90-day check-ins with them. Is there anything that you see that we're doing that's too convoluted, or that you see a faster path, and open the door for them to share? Because you're going to find skills and you're going to find input there, just by opening the door and asking the questions. I had another thought too about bringing on a team member well. We have a runner on our team, and we have the runner the night before they officially start drop off a box on their front door. And it's our hiring manual. Like for our agents, it's a whole like book that they can carry around for the first year on the team that like talks about, offer strategies and all of the things an agent would need. For staff, it's a little more simplified, but so a team polo, a name tag, if it's an agent, we're throwing business cards in there or whatever it is that they need to kind of get started. But just the thought of sending it the day before they hire and having it magically show up on their front porch makes people feel like they're coming. Because what I see done as a mistake often in hiring is that, again, we're plugging holes and using duct tape, and we're like, I don't know, just follow me around. I'll teach you as I go. Or I don't know, figure it out. And you like sit people in a seat and you're like, I just need you to do this. And it gets very flustered very fast. So slowing down, making them feel like they're a part and on purpose and you're ready for them. And then carving out time. If it's you and you're trying to hire an assistant, you've gotta give that assistant time. And you've got to give them permission to ask you for time. And then you have to not be annoyed when they need you, because eventually they won't need you. The goal is to work them off from needing you. But in the beginning, they can't read your brain. They don't know you well enough to know if they can read your brain. And so if it's just you and one other person, you've got to give them time. It's the best thing you can put into other people. If it's not you, identify who it is in the organization as a mentor that they can have as time. This is your point of contact for every question that you have. Our director of agent services is on this call right now. I can see her. She is unbelievable because she shoulders that burden on behalf of all of the leadership for the team. And she's the best point person. She knows all the answers. She's wise beyond, I'm just going to echo later. She's wise beyond belief. So they don't need to come to me. They need to go to her. And she can help them get everywhere that they need to be. So just depending on how you're structured, identify who that is, make it clear to the hiring person, this is your point person, so that they know who to go to for what they need.
Yeah, and I love that you said that. And I had just made a note as well, leveraging a broker or a coach or somebody for that if you need to. Now, let's be clear, that is a big leverage with an exclamation point. I mean, you can't outsource it, but just leveraging, hey, I'd love for you to meet with it's been a whole week. Would you meet with person X? It could be a spouse or somebody. I mean, anybody. Yeah. Just for them to be able to give some kind of safe feedback and say, yeah, it's been fun, but, or, I didn't expect that it was going to be a bunch of desk work, or, I didn't realize that it was going to be this, that, and the other. But if you nip that early, or if you realize that, maybe if they worked at a desk one day a week and then they could drive around with an agent on another and kind of learn some lingo or see what they say to clients, it's funny because on some level it's so scary, and on another level, number one, you just eat the elephant one bite at a time, and number two, there are all people all around that are willing to give some, whether it's, do it on a piece of paper, write down some questions and hand it to them. What are some areas you see we could improve? What could I do? And I think I have this in the guide too. What can I do, to better help you in your day to day? Or just, it's not rocket science, but you do have to give it some attention and thought to be intentional about it.
The other piece of the puzzle is don't be afraid to say to a new hire, listen, we hired you to help us fill this hole in this need. We need you to help us build this. So like, I want to spend as much time up front, like pouring into you and helping you understand how all the pieces connect to this. And then I want to let you work in it for a minute. And then I want your feedback on how we could fix this or how we could grow this, because we brought you in for a reason. And you're empowering people from the start to put their thumbprints all over what you're building. Because ultimately, if you want people to stay, they have to feel connected to what you're doing together as a team. We are doing this. We are building, it's we language. We are building this together. But that also means they're not just following a checklist, even if their position is checklist. It's
Right.
we are building, and there are, don't get me wrong, there are checklisty types of positions. Like, Lee mentioned off the top of this that there are internship programs where you're bringing somebody in for like a 2-month period of time. So it needs to be a little more checklist, or maybe a VA who, is doing specific tasks just to kind of wrangle those for you. But giving people, no one wants to be without power in their work life. We all, you don't get into real estate without wanting a little bit of freedom and even those that come in as staff, like we want to feel like we can put our thumbprint on things. We want to feel like we have ownership of it at the core. And that doesn't matter if you're a 9 to 5 position or a 24/7 real estate, position. That's just the core of who humanity is. So if you can give people permission for that, but then watch and provide some accountability, because obviously you don't want them changing things or doing things that affect other cogs in the wheel or that are going to pull down all of your systems. You're providing them a gift, and they're not going to want to go work anywhere else, because they'll feel like they have been given freedom to be who they want to be in the organization, to add their stamp to the organization and add to the success. That's so important.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. And you're totally right. I mean, nobody wants to be somebody's assistant or somebody, whatever. Like, empower people, to be more than that, to find, their own lane, find their own voice, find improvements in your business. And it really is a big part of mindset, right? Like, if you're doing this so that you're the top dog or so that everybody can be your assistant, like, that's not really, it's not a good way to be. That said, I want to be fair that, like, you and I have learned this through doing it, making a million mistakes. Like I say about everything,
Yeah.
this is much more often about what not to do than it is about what to do. I guarantee you pretty much all the things we said today not to do, we've probably both done them in some way, shape, or form. So
Multiple times, I think.
yeah, so it's learning. Shelly had a great question I want to tackle, at least at a high level, and if we can come up with something after, then we can share. But she asked if we had a org chart example to share. And so, and you may have one if you're comfortable sharing it, but here's how I do this. I use a program. You can use whatever you want. You can use a pen and paper. I use a program called draw.io. I think it's called diagrams.net now. And I believe it's owned by Google, because it just works in Google Drive on top of like a doc, but it's literally a flowchart program. And quite honestly, the reason I don't have a sample one is that everyone's business is so incredibly different. But what I typically do is just pull in, okay, here's you, literally drag in a little oval. I'm like, okay, here's you. Now, what is this? Is there a resale team? Is there a new construction team? Is there like a marketing department? Like, what are the pieces of this machine? And again, like I mentioned before, I like to go 5 years into the future.
Mm-hmm.
It's just writing down what you think it is now. It's helpful, but it's not really the same thing. And then you just literally drag the things around. You're like, oh, what would it look like if you had 4 managers that reported to you, and then one managed staff, one managed a resale team, one's a sales manager or sales coach or whatever, trainer, whatever that thing is. And I think, to me, the beautiful thing about it is how iterative it is. It is going, oh, well, what if we put John in charge of, marketing and operations? What would that look like? Oh, but what if to me, it really is about kind of just trial and error.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have an org chart, Shelly, that I can share with you, but I'll share my screen super quickly and you can see it. it's more of a public facing org chart. So this is not what Lee's talking about where we're manipulating people around. This is like what we could show a client if we were trying to explain our structure. So at the top, you've got our four like operations people, essentially leadership, but we didn't want to put leadership on this sheet because again, I want to empower every person in the organization to lead from their seat. Client and agent services are our client care coordinators or TCs, transaction managers essentially. And then you have Jay-Z, who's our director of agent services, who technically is kind of oversight over the agents. She's watching over their databases. She's watching over their pipelines. She's making sure that they can be successful in what we've brought them on to do. And then these three ladies here are helping her make that happen. So they work behind the scenes and they are checking databases. They are watching follow-up boss notifications. They're serving up some of the things behind the scenes to our agents to make sure they're in the field that they're not missing notifications. And then I mentioned our field services, who runs around all day long and puts signs in yards and picks up lock boxes and does whatever. I mean, I think he was like spraying a hornet's nest down at one point when I just, whatever needs to be done gets done. Marketing, we've got our listing team. These guys focus on MLS marketing, and it's their job to handle listing paperwork, helping the agents through all of that, maximizing every listing field from MLS, since that's where all marketing starts. And then down here, you've got our marketing team. So we've got listing marketing up here, and then you've got brand marketing down here, which that's a whole nother webinar with professional writer, SEO, content specialist, photographer, and then just our agents. And our agents all hybrid. They do buy side and list side. So they're here. We have a couple that operate in like pods, which is why you see them kind of tucked into groups at the top. And so they work in partnership, so they get to be at the top up there. We used to have an in-house ISA department, and we've gone to having agents answer the phone for us. That's also probably a whole different conversation, but you can see that our org chart is just, it's really simplified because in our world, everything is still relatively flat. So the client care coordinators are reporting mainly to me as the operations person, and it's my job to make sure that they are getting met with and heard, and that they have what they need to do what they're doing, and they rely on each other. Like we've hired really good, amazing people that can lean on each other and use each other as resources to do their job well. And then, like I said, Jay-Z is kind of managing the agents. And then I work very closely with Jay-Z, and Jay-Z obviously works closely with Mike and Jen too in our business. But we all lean on each other, and we've just created a culture for that, so it works.
That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that too. That was really good. I think, to me, it's funny how similar and different we are. Like, to me, I like the kind of stick figure, like so-and-so, and then they're over this team, but that is definitely more visually appealing. And I think also gives, more of the outward external feel
It's
for
a
it.
cheat. It's so that we can learn each other's names. That's why.
Right.
Truly, like I especially right now over Zoom, like it's, and the bigger that you get, the harder it is for everyone to know everyone. So the more we can use faces, the better. We actually, Shelly, another thing you could do, we've created a team map using Google. And so every person's residence is on the map as a pin in their, if you click on it, their face pops up, all of their contact information is there. And it's a really easy resource for your team to hop on and go, we serve 100, we're 114 zip codes down here last year, just with our team, which is crazy. And so for somebody living on the west side, it's an hour and a half all the way across to the east side. They can look on the map and know who their resource on the team is on the other side of the city. And it's not an org chart, but it's a really easy way to keep track of where your people are coming from, so that they can resource each other within inside of the organization too.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really, really cool. I'm very impressed with that org chart. If anybody has any questions, I know we're a tiny bit over time. If anybody has any burning questions, throw them at us. Emily and I are both also very active in the Follow Up Boss Facebook group. So you're very, very welcome to drop questions in after the fact to that chat, and Emily and I are happy to answer them. I also dropped a link to that hiring guide in the Facebook comments. And we're happy to talk. And again, in about a month-ish, we'll be doing a similar session, but more focused on recruiting agents, recruiting and retaining agents. So appreciate you guys being on. Emily, it's always amazing to spend time with you.
I know, I love it. It's great, Lee. Thanks for the invite.
All right, you guys take care. We'll see you soon.